Welcome to the One Player Podcast, the show on solitaire board games. I'm your host, Albert, and this is episode 364.
What power? Power of the voodoo. Who do? You do what? Remind me of the power.
What power?
The power of the babe, technically. But the power of the plants today.
Yeah, that's right.
That is a very old movie reference.
Oh, yeah. For people that don't know it, that's Labyrinth with David Bowie. Ah, such a good movie.
Very old, very good movie.
And they're remaking it, I think, maybe.
Are they really?
Maybe it was just false rumors or something. I'm not sure. But I remember seeing something about that recently that I didn't really dig into. That would be neat.
Oh, that's actually interesting.
Actually, maybe it's best if they just leave really good movies alone. They might be better, maybe, but a lot of times they're not.
Well, I mean, there is the vassal rule for board games, so maybe it applies for movies too. I'm not sure.
Oh, what is it? That eventually a game will get redone?
If it's a good game that gets re-released, yes, that is
okay.
the vassal.
Okay. Like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a good movie, so they re-released it.
Yeah.
Made it better.
Yeah.
I don't think about better. I don't know about that.
But we are talking about a different form of wizard entirely. Planting wizards.
Yes. The magic of planting and gardening.
But with magic.
But with magic, my favorite. Gardening is not something I enjoy at all. I don't mind destroying things and pulling out weeds, for example, but I don't like planting.
Yes.
I don't know why.
Well, that's what today's game is about. Today's game, we are talking about power plants, where everyone is portraying or playing as a wizard. And all players in the game are sharing a plot of land or a plot of garden, and we're all planting together, and all of our plants interact and do stuff, and we will continue doing that until we run out of plants to plant. And whoever has the most points, based on some area control or area majority and a couple other methods of getting points, primarily area control, but whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to score and win.
That's right. Sounds pretty straightforward and simple. And it is. It gets complicated as you're playing.
To a degree.
Yeah, to a degree. Okay, so today's game is published by Kids Table
Board Games.
Yes. Hey, dog, you gotta stay inside. And the designer is Adam E. Dalton. I have a dog in the room with me today, and she wants to get out, but she can't get out because she was just whining to come over here. So now she's stuck. So I'm sorry she'll be making noise, and I don't know that I'll be able to edit her out completely.
Just blame it on the wizard.
Yeah, darn wizards, darn dog wizards, pet wizards. So this game, as you said, you're a wizard. And you need to make potions and stuff, and for that you need plants. And there's a plant garden that you share with other wizards, right?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Okay, then let's talk about the components.
So, probably the prime component in this game is going to be the patches of plants. There are a bunch of wooden, they're basically six-sided hexagram shapes, but they have little cutouts so that they sort of interlock together nicely. But they're these large wooden patches, like I think 3 inches to a side, something like that. Big chunky pieces with nice, bright, vivid colors. So there's the different colors. It's pretty easy to see the difference between them. Each of them has a number at the top that shows for if you have a tie, it defaults to whoever controls the highest ranked patch. So 1 beats 2, etc. So it's easy to see the numbers. It's easy to see the different patches. All those are really nice. In addition, you have a set of gem tokens.
You said that these are wooden tiles. Now that's specifically for the deluxe edition. There's also a standard edition that's cardboard tiles. That's worth pointing that out because at least currently the publisher is out of stock of the deluxe edition. You can only get the cardboard edition. So that is worth knowing. And the nice thing about that is the cardboard version is only $30 retail, while the deluxe is $50.
Interesting. I obviously have the deluxe one, and I had not been aware that the other one didn't have the wood ones. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about the other differences.
So there are the wood ones for the ones I'm talking about. In addition, every player has a set of sprites, and these are what you're going to use to show your control. They could have been just cubes, but they're little fairy, very small little fairy meeples.
But if you have the regular edition, then you get cubes.
Oh, you just get cubes.
You get cubes. They could have been cubes, and
Oh,
they are cubes.
oh, well, there you go. Ours are small little fairy meeples. They're actually different shapes for each of the 5 different player colors. Um,
Oh,
Smaller meeples, but it's really just the different colors that's the most important part, and they look very nice. Um, in addition, over the course of the game, you're going to have gem tokens, and so gems are just a way of that. Essentially, they're points. They're points that just grow the course of the game, or they're points that will be sending out for control.
I have the deluxe edition also, but mine, all the fairies are the same shape. It looks like, or at least three of them, three of the colors are out of the 5.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe. Do you have the Kickstarter fanciest edition, or just the deluxe
The
edition?
Kickstarter. I think there was just retail and deluxe on Kickstarter. Yeah, there was retail and deluxe.
I think there's also a Kickstarter edition. I'm not positive, but I think so. Maybe. Anyway, so yeah, so my fairies all look the same, other than their color, but they are fairy shaped.
Okay. Um. So yes, there's a bunch of little fairy shapes. Honestly, it really
It doesn't
they
matter.
could have been
The-
cubes. It doesn't matter at
yeah,
all. The gem tokens, at least in mine, they're wood tokens. I imagine these are probably cardboard in the non-deluxe. But the gem tokens, they're big things. Interestingly, they had both 1s and 2 tokens, and then went to 5 and 10 after that. I don't know why they decided to have both 1s and 2s. It's not a
yeah.
denomination we normally see with these things.
No, I'm surprised too. It's handy though. I'm glad they're there, but it's definitely
Yeah.
not necessary.
Then you have a bag to hold all the patches. So whichever patches that you're playing in the game go in the bag. Now then, I'm going to talk with a couple, essentially quality of life components, because all those are the things that you need to play the game. You need the patches, you need the sprite markers, you need the bag to hold the patches, and you need the gem tokens. You don't really need the things that I'm going to talk about next. So I'm going to talk about them. One of them is there's a wizard pawn. Theoretically, when you put out a piece, you're supposed to put out the piece with the wizard pawn to show that's the piece you just put out now. Many of the different things interact with based on the piece that you're currently putting out now, about which ones are adjacent, which ones are not. You really want to be putting out that wizard piece, and life can get confusing in a hurry if you're not putting that piece out, even though the piece has no other effect. It's just being used so that you see which pieces that you're putting out now. Even having played the game a bunch, especially because there's a bunch of different patches, having a wizard piece that you put out makes it so much simpler to be able to do that.
It really does help. Yeah, it anchors where the focus of the action is. Playing with my son, he kept forgetting to put the wizard out there, and I have to ask him, "Could you put the wizard so I could better visualize what's going on?"
Yeah. I will say that for the deluxe one we have, it came with expansions, and one of the expansions was it gave a set of wizards for everyone. Um, Theoretically, it's supposed to be that when you play the game, your wizard stays and nobody can mess with the patch that your wizard is on. We more just use it that even if the last person forgot to take off theirs, you're excited to use your piece, and so you're going to put on your piece. And so that's sort of more, just from personal experience, people put the wizard on the piece more often if it's in their player color than if we're passing around a wizard player piece around the board.
Oh, how interesting! Yeah, so my edition only brings a single wizard that's red, and you have to pass them around. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no individual wizards.
Yeah.
The basic version brings a wizard uh, cylinder.
Yeah. The next one that I'm going to talk about, there are plant cards and reference sheets. So each of the plants, all the plants will do things, and I'll come back when we get to gameplay about the things they do. But all the plants will do things. There are these thick, bigger than tarot, very wide banner almost size cards for each of the different plants. So you'll essentially shuffle up the cards, pull out 5 of them, put them out, and those big reference cards will be a big reference for the plants that you're going to be using that game. There is also a set of smaller reference sheets. So the big reference cards will theoretically go somewhere on the table Everyone will look over and see those on the other side of the table. There are large player sheets, large reference sheets that, or excuse me, there are small, there's similar sized reference sheets that you can give to everyone that has all of the different plants possible. So that's like 8 on one side. If you have the alternate plants, there's 8 on the other side. I don't know if the non-deluxe comes with the alternate plants. I'm questioning things at this point.
Mm-mm.
Do
Yeah,
you
at
have
this point, it
alternate plants?
has. I have 8 plants, and they do have the alternate side. Yes.
Okay, so it's a separate set of cards.
Yes. There's 16 cards total
Yeah, perfect.
in my edition.
So the two sides are on it. Theoretically, I have issues with this reference sheet. The reference sheet is difficult to use because if you only have 5 out, and there's 16 options split on 2 sides for this reference sheet. Someone who wants to refer to it is constantly flipping back and forth. You have to keep bundling with it. I wish that there had been a small deck of cards, 16 cards a person. I'm aware that's now a large deck of small
It's a big
cards.
ask, yeah.
Yeah, it is a big ask. I wish it existed. I would get it because I would rather give everyone exactly a small personal reference, even if it's just really what I would want is an iconized version of the main plant cards and pass those out so that everyone has their own set of iconized version that can
Hmm.
refer for the big text to the main ones. But with reference sheets, it's like some of them are on the back, some on the front, some of them are not being used, and you forget which ones you're actually working with. And uh, the reference sheets causes
Yeah,
me more grief than help.
that is frustrating. So I've played either solo or 2-player games, and what I did is each person got 2 sheets, so you could have one facing the front and one in the back, and you don't have to do the flipping, and that simplifies it. But you still have the issue that when you're playing, the order of the plants matters because you deal them out randomly, and they take actions from top to bottom in some instances. But your reference sheet has them in a specific order. You can't rearrange it, so you still have to kind of jump up and down on your sheet comparing to the master list of the large
Yeah.
cards. So it's still difficult. You're right. Something like cards or tiles, anything would have made it so much more easy to use, so much more
I just
playable.
wish there were a deck of mini
Yeah,
Euro
a deck would
cards,
be great.
16 a person, or even 8 a person. Like 8 a person, double side them. That would have been great. I wish it existed, and it could be that at one point in time I'll find the time to make my own.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
I wish
cut
it's.
up, cut up the cards you have,
I
and then
thought about doing that, but they
you
don't
know.
line up nicely enough to do it.
Oh, because yeah, that's right. The back and the front don't line up.
I absolutely would have otherwise.
Yeah, and this game is only $32, $30 if you get the basic version. So, you know, upgrading it to cards would raise the cost, but it's still been relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is. You're right. That would be nicer. That would definitely be nicer.
So,
On the same vein, one of the other components is a solitaire reference rule, which is a double-sided sheet of paper that has all the rules of how to play solitaire. I find that when I'm playing solitaire, I need to reference that constantly and flip it back and forth depending on what I'm doing. I wish that was cardstock or something different because it's just a flimsy piece of paper that's going to wear over time.
you have to flip it back and forth.
Yes, because the front tells you the priorities of placing the plan, so I have to reference that occasionally, and some of the turn stuff and some of the main rules, and then the back tells you what the different plants powers are for the bot, as well as
Right.
the something else. Oh, the plant priority when choosing where to do stuff. So yeah,
Okay.
so I find that also a little annoying, but I mean these are kind of nitpicky things. Yeah, it would be nicer, but it does work.
I mean, I find the reference sheet is very annoying. It's not enough that I want to give up on the game, but it is something that I really would like to spend the time fixing. I just haven't taken the time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um. So just a quick rundown of the components comparing the deluxe and the basic versions, and I guess yours is a Kickstarter version, which is different. The
Yes.
the
And
basic
there's one
version,
more.
the
Yeah, go on.
oh, there's more.
There's more because I was going to talk about some of the stuff that's only then I know is only in the Kickstarter. But go on.
Oh yeah,
What are you referring to?
I know there's stuff you have I don't. What is that?
Yeah, so first I have an insert that essentially holds all the tiles.
Oh.
The tiles are huge to take a bunch of room, and essentially it holds all the tiles nicely, but everything else just sort of gets dumped in a big pile. So all of the tokens and all of the player tokens and all of the gems and all those things, they just get dumped in a big pile.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that at all. I mine are in little individual bags, and when
Yeah,
I'm
I
playing, I
mean,
open up the bag.
it's fine, but it's just a tight box space. The other thing I know you don't have.
Mini expansions?
So I have all the mini expansions, of which I've really not played very many with them, with one exception. I have two more plants than you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you have 16 cards. I have
Yep.
20 because I have 10 plants in the box. Um,
Yep.
that's fine with one exception. The extra plants aren't printed on the reference card.
Oh. So you have the same reference card I do then, I guess. Yeah.
I have the same exact reference card, but not the extra plants.
So they're just printed on their individual cards and that's it? Or is there
Yep.
like a separate? Oh, okay.
Nope. They're just on theirs. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's a couple small misses on this game in the really related I think mainly to the different versions too.
I it really is just centering around that reference card. The
Yeah.
miss for me is that reference card, and with the complexity of the plant types, missing on that reference card has an effect on it.
Yeah. Yep. That's interesting. Okay. I do know that those are available from the publisher, just those two plants as an expansion. And I was looking at it last night, but they're kind of expensive. I think it was like $12 for them, but then with shipping, it came out to like 30 or something total because it's coming from Canada
For all of the expansions, or just for the two
for
extra
the two
plants?
plants, just the two plants.
Oh,
So I said, eh, no, it's kind of expensive.
that's a shame.
Yeah, because it's only available in Canada. If it were available from the U.S. locally, and I haven't found it online anywhere.
I will say I don't think they're necessary, but they are interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do want to hear more about them. All right. So, quick comparison of the three versions, I guess, just to clear it up if that helps, or to confuse things if it just is too much information. The basic version, um, plant tiles are cardboard. In the deluxe, they're wood. In the Kickstarter, they're wood. The the fairy, the pixie, what is it called? The sprite pawns.
Sprites.
Basic are cubes. Deluxe is sprite figures. In Kickstarter, custom sprite figures per color.
Yep.
And then the is that the only difference? Oh, the wizards. The basic version has a wizard cylinder. Deluxe has a wizard pawn, and the Kickstarter edition has wizard pawns for each color.
Which is part
I
of just
don't
one
know
of the
that.
mini expansions.
Oh, okay. I don't know if the basic version has a drawback or not. I would think so. It's kind of necessary, but
According to what I'm seeing online, it has a drawback without any screen printing, and the deluxe and
oh
Kickstarter have screen printing.
no, mine doesn't have screen printing either, actually.
Oh, Kickstarter does.
So just the Kickstarter does, yeah. It's gotta be hard, and then the Kickstarter has expansions that neither of the two versions have. It's gotta be hard to manage so many different editions of a game like that. I would not
Uh huh.
like that personally. Gosh, that's
That's why I'm shocked that they did it to
yeah,
do three different ones.
yeah. I mean, there's other companies that do more. Like at the game store, I keep seeing boxes, and it's like, what are all these boxes? Oh, these are the different versions. Depending on what version you get either this box or that box or these other two boxes. It's what a mess, man. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that. So anyway, that's everything you get in the game. It's actually not that much. It's only gotten long because we're talking about the versions a bit.
So let's move on to the rules.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
The perhaps because the game is complicated, the rules are pretty much fine. I think I was able to understand how you play the game and how it's scored and how everything works from the rules just fine. Um, the difference between the powers and the plants and the way it works, that is complicated, and that's for the most part just something being printed on the plant cards and not being printed in the rules. So the rules do a perfectly fine job of explaining the rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, though I will say there was some confusion for us. It's not always super clear, I think, in the meaning. Um, there, there's one plant, for example, that it said, what does it say? When you take its action, you you pick a field next to the wizard and then move a sprite to a different patch. And the way the sentence was written, it seemed like it could mean a different patch in the same field, but not necessarily. And there's nothing that clarified that. And then I go on BGG and I look it up, and the designer, somebody asked that specific question, the designer answers it again, not with enough detail to just sort of left it bit vague. So I did find a little bit of confusion, but mostly just on the how to interpret the plant powers. I do think
I,
the rules themselves are very clear and easy to follow, and once you read them, you have a really good sense of how to play.
yeah, I haven't had that issue, and I'm not sure what you're referring to, but yeah, I find the rules just fine.
Okay, yeah. Um, yeah, I won't worry about it. If anybody gets stuck with that question, they'll look on BGG and they'll find what I'm talking about, and if they don't, just as well. All right. Is it thematic?
No.
First of all, because wizards don't share gardens. That's a problem I have with it right there.
Yeah. They're sharing gardens. They're putting sprites out. The gardens are sort of interesting. Like, why? What? No, there's wizards cast spells. Magic gardens that we're sharing and doing area control of the gardens where I want to work. No,
Yeah, no.
no, it's not.
Plants, magical plants
No.
move sprites around and make gold. Um, so I don't know. It's a cute theme, but it doesn't feel terribly thematic. It doesn't. It's a little hard to believe it.
Yeah.
Though that being said, this company, Kid Table Board Games, makes games for kids. All their games are 8 plus, 8 years older or older. So I think they're not as
And
worried about the theme as about the funness and the cute factor and that sort of thing.
to be clear, they have it's not a sister company, but a sister publisher. I think it's Burnt Island Games. Yes, Burnt Island Games is the same
Okay.
publishing company. So they make midweight. So they're supposed to be lower weight, and Burnt Island is the next level up.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the same team. They just changed their labeling based upon the weight of the game they're talking about. So they consider this a lower weight game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the gameplay then, and then people can decide if they agree with that or not.
Yeah, okay, here we go. So, in terms of gameplay, essentially you have a hand of two patches, and you will pick one of those patches and add it to the garden. Some of the patches will come with a free sprite just for putting it out. Most of them don't. But when you put it out, you must then choose if you want to use sprout or grow. The sprout power is it's essentially doing a cool thing to the patch itself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that patch will sprout and use its very powerful version of ability. Alternatively, you can choose to grow. When you grow, every patch next to the one you just put out will do its grow ability, which is sort of like a mini version of its sprout. So if Sprout puts out, say, 4 sprites, when you grow, you maybe put out like 1 or 2, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And the advantage of that is you're going to grow with all of the ones that are touching. So if you put it out and you touch like 3 or even 4 patches all at once, you'll grow and you'll do all of them. And your net total power stuff being done will be a lot higher than if you just use a sprout. Or by diversifying effects, you'll have unique interactions, you'll do some more stuff. But you'll put out one patch, you'll choose to either sprout or grow.
Mm-hmm.
You'll draw another patch to refresh your hand, and that is it. That is the entirety of your turn. At the end of the
Sounds
game,
simple.
it sounds,
Should fly by.
yeah, you'd think. At the end of the
Yeah.
game, you're then, because scoring is where it's going to be. So some of the patches will give you gems over the course of the game. Those gems are just straight up points. Some of the plants will put gems on spaces. Whoever controls that space gets the gem at the end of the game, and that gem is then going to be worth points. Then you will start sort of pulling out patches to see who controls fields. So a field is a group of plants that are all the same type. So, for example, if you have 4 purple plants that all touch each other, then they'll form a group called a field. You'll pull those aside. You'll say, hey, that is a field of 4 purple plants, so 4 patches. And you'll then consult the chart, which is on the reference sheet and the scoring page. And you'll consult the chart and you'll say, hey, whoever gets first place, whoever controls the most amount of patches, gets 7 points. Now, this is who controls the most patches, not who has the most sprite power. Sprite power it's just being put on a patch. So even if you control 6 patches and the other person controls 1 patch with 20 sprites, it doesn't matter. They only control 1 patch. You can, even if you want, not I wouldn't recommend it, but you can, like, even if you want, reduce it down to 1 sprite per patch. You may not want to do that. That may be harder, especially for some of the tie breaks. But that gets across the idea that it's really based upon how many patches you control. Because it's all about how many patches you control, that means that during the game, if you ever put a sprite on a spot where someone else has a sprite, those sprites just cancel out. Instead of putting one down, you just remove someone else's. And only if there's no sprites there do you actually get to put a sprite. And
Is that the
that
way
is how you
then I
determine.
misunderstood the rule. I thought that was only when you move a sprite.
No,
Oh,
sprites will never share patches.
I thought if you put sprites on a space, you remove the opponent's sprites as you put them on. So
Yes,
like if you have
opponents.
3, okay, so if your opponent has 3 sprites in a patch, and I played a plan that says add a sprite to the patch next to the wizard, you could place your one to remove all 3.
No, just one.
Oh, okay. Well, that changes a bit. That's interesting. I know that if you, I read that if you move the sprite, then there's a canceling. But I thought, no, better double check that. Anyway, okay. So placing sprites affects the
So if they
result.
have 3 and you put 1 sprite on it, it ends up that they now have 2.
Okay. Okay. So the rules could be a little clearer.
Um, I mean,
Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on.
it puts it in pretty big bold.
I have to read that again. Okay, let's. So
Yeah.
so anyway, playing the powers does stuff.
So back to the idea of how endgame works. So you then pull away each one. You see who controls the most patches. Whoever controls the most patches gets points. Second place gets points. Sometimes third place gets points. And you go and figure it all out and how many points you get. We actually give out gems for those points that are done. That just makes it easier to score all at the end. Total,
Mm-hmm.
see how many points you have. Whoever has the most amount of points at that point in time wins the game.
Yep. Simple. It really is simple.
Yeah, it's not it's the gameplay itself is relatively simple. Explaining all of that is relatively simple. A lot of the complexity comes into just how many things you can possibly do on your turn, because each patch that has both its sprout power and a big thing, and then each time you put it, you'll have a ton of options for stuff that you can grow, because all the stuff around the outside of the board is all things that you can grow and do and activate. So if you put one down and you go through and you activate them all, it can have a lot of effect. It can do a lot of things. There's a lot of decisions like, do I want to put the sprites here and do this? Do I want to focus on one and make even more things? There is a ton of decision points. I imagine there is a ton of spots for real analysis paralysis on trying to figure out where it is that you want to do and move and do stuff in your turn, just because of how many decisions there are. I say you have 2 tiles in your hand. Even with just 2 tiles in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the amount of analysis that you really have to do to optimize turns, I don't know that I do it that very well, because there's a lot of decision
Yeah.
spots to figure out where it is that you want to do.
I am grateful there's only 2 tiles.
Yeah. And having said that, it is a very rewarding set of decision space. being able to pick where things can go and figure out how stuff goes around, that is very rewarding. We've mentioned it so many times. I strongly favor games that reward your decision making and being able to make you feel smart when you make good moves. This game very much makes you feel smart because there's that fight going on in the middle of the board trying to put some down or maybe get the last person on internal space, so that it's very hard to affect internal patches because you can generally only affect things if you put them on. So if you manage to close off internal patches or put out a one patch to grab control of another patch, or you continue making it even more giant patch, or you move patches around to be able to do other stuff, especially with some of the extra plants that have even more movement of whole plants, or have exile plants, or have reserving patch spaces, things like that. So a lot of these things have a lot of complexity and decision space and reward playing well and give you an opportunity to have fun playing in that decision space. But it can be complicated. It certainly does not feel like a lower weight game. Having said that, the game comes with a family mode or a training mode.
Hmm.
If you want, you can just play with sprout powers only, no growing. When you are playing with sprout powers, it is a very good way to learn what the plants are. The sprout powers are just like littler effects than the big ones, and you start to develop a feel for what the difference by learning just the grow ones. You'll get a feel for how they do what it is that they do, and then adding on sprout afterwards does not feel like as much of a jump. So playing, especially with a newer player or someone who doesn't feel confident on it, playing a training mode game first where you only have grow makes it a lot easier to understand the whole game. Now that means you have to play two whole players to the game. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
It definitely makes it easier to be able to play that way.
Okay. Yeah, I did. We didn't try that at all. The
Yeah, you guys are experienced gamers. You don't need any training wheels.
So one of the notes is I had that the game is very chaotic because it could swing in a dime, and that's probably not true because I was mainly based on the fact that you could easily like take your opponent's all his sprites off the board and replace him with yours in one action.
Oh,
I
you
think
can't
that's a
do
lot
that.
less true. There's still, well, yeah, there's still some of that. There's one or two plans that are pretty powerful. They'll let you like replace a bunch of other things.
Yeah, no, there's intense battles that have gone I've played multiplayer with my family. We've played it a bunch. There are some intense battles that go on with a push pull, and sometimes people will do the surprising things. I mentioned a couple of them just now, where they'll instead of we've gone through a whole battle, and so someone's been like, I control this one now. I'm like, well, I'm still holding number one patch, so I'm going to come on. We're just going to add to it,
Oh,
or I'm going to break up like you had. Yeah, you gain control of a 7 size patch. Well, what if I ruin your center one and make it so that your center one is not connected? So now you have two threes instead of a 7.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, those kind of things are delicious.
Yeah, and a lot of that depends on what plants are available because that splitting up a patch in half only works if certain plants are out. It doesn't work with every plant. So every game, you're using 5 out of the 8 different plants that are available.
10.
Right, three.
Oh,
Well, okay, for
8.
Julius, 10 are available. That's 8 for most people that aren't Julius. Um, so you're not going to have all the powers available to you. So it really changes from game to game what sort of things you could do and how the game feels. Some game there's a lot of gems on the board. Some games there's none or very few. Some games there's a lot more attacking sort of things. Others there's less. And I like that about it. I like that every time you play, it's a different setup because of the plans that get chosen, and it plays very differently. Plus, if you're using both sides, then that doubles the amount of abilities. It's not just 5 plants; it's more like 10 or something to pick from. And I
Yeah.
think that is really neat because and the plants are so different. We didn't really get into the details of how different they are, but like we could give a couple examples. Maybe there's one that's pretty simple. The red plant, I forget what it's called. When you place the wizard down that plant down and the wizard on it, you could add 3 sprites to it. Easy enough. No big deal.
Yeah.
There's there's another one that, for example, that when you add it, you capture an enemy sprite that's next to the plant, which means you put it into your pool. At the end of the game, you'll get points for it. You basically ransom it to the owner of that sprite, and then replace it with one of yours. So that's a bit more complicated. There's another one. What else is there? There's some that affect all the plants around it, or fields, entire fields. I may say, look at the plants patches around your wizard, and extend throughout that entire field of each of those patches, and find the actual patch you want to affect. Which then is, I think, is even way more complicated because now it really expands how much you're looking at and how many different tiles, how many different patch tiles you have to consider. And that's a lot of where the analysis paralysis comes in. That first one where you just place three sprites, it's not very thinky there. So it's a nice
And I
break.
will say, the game is intelligent and it's designed with having a mix of more complicated and less complicated. It splits
Mm-hmm.
the plants into different groups. So there's morning, afternoon, and nightfall plants. And when you set up the game, you have a certain amount of each category, and then it ensures you have some of the more simpler basic ones that just throw out a bunch, some of the really complicated ones where you mess with plants and move plants around or move sprites around, and some of the end game ones where you're capturing sprites or capturing tiles or ruining tiles and things like that.
I see. That only comes up with if you have the expansion, then I guess, because with the base game, I have two of each category exactly. And I saw that symbol on the cards and I had no idea what it meant because it didn't mention it in the rules. So that must be an expansion thing.
Are your rules just different? It doesn't say that in your rules?
I don't think. Let me see. What page of the rules are you talking about?
Page 3?
Page 3. Oh, there they are in a separate little color. Arrange the columns by timing category.
Yeah, on the bottom half it says, while any five plants create a fun game, including at least two morning, at least one noon, and at least
Oh.
one night in a group, will result in a game that feels well balanced.
I had totally missed that. Okay. The day I learned the setup, I was so tired. It was way later than it should have been when I was doing this. And so I missed a
Uh,
few things in the setup. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. I was just using the any good combo is fine.
yeah, I
That
mean
is
it's
that is
true,
good to
but
know. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I mean they all work. Like I said, it changes the feel of the game.
yeah, I cannot imagine
Oh.
the game having like four nighttime plants. That might be rough.
I wonder. I may have had a game like that.
Yeah,
I wonder. All right, so Julius, let's talk about the solo game.
sure, Albert. Do you have comments?
Uh, well, I do appreciate that the solo rules are a separate page. Not really. I mean,
I thought you
actually,
would
no.
mention that.
It works fine in this game, honestly, because you learn the rules. The solo rules really are not that different, and and you have to reference them a lot when you're figuring out how the plant works. At least until you get really familiar with the game.
And just to be clear, the way the solo rules work is it's automa type thing where you pull a patch and you follow a specific set of rules to put it, especially putting it in the place where it's the most influential. And then it has a special reference card for all the stuff that its patches do. And I don't think you can use it with the Kickstarter ones. I'm not sure. But it has a
Mm.
special reference for what all of its things do. And you do exactly whatever that is, and it moves things around and it gets in the way or deletes your patches and does all those sorts of things. And then score yours as is possible. Face off with the mole however this you want. You can increase the difficulty about how it is, about how field area control works. But for the most part, just score as normal and see how much you get.
Mhm.
For me, I know that there is the more difficult ways of scoring and about having to control more or things like that. And it doesn't change anything about the game or what it is that it's doing. It just means that I have to do an extra rule. And I'm not facing off against anyone else. I don't need to change the scoring because I feel like it needs to be hard on me. It didn't do anything. So I just want to get a higher score on easy rather than losing up to medium or hard, which is different than I felt with many other different games. But hey,
That's interesting. Yeah, the um the solo. game does not feel very different from the multiplayer game. I think the,
Hmm.
for the bot, you draw a tile every turn from the bag, and that's what it does. That's not that different from the multiplayer game, where each turn in a multiplayer game, after you play your tile, at the end of the turn, you draw a tile anyway. So you're still drawing a tile every turn. That's no different. The actions that the Mo, as the AI is called, or the bot is called, are different for the plants than the player. They're slightly different, but they're still thematically very similar to the way that plant works for the players.
Hmm.
There is no difference between sprout and grow. It just has an action for that plant that is like that.
Yeah, it
It's a little
plays
more
like family
powerful than a
mode where
player.
it always does sprout.
Yeah, but it's not exactly sprout, but it's very sproutish. Then the only thing that really adds complexity is figuring out when there's a choice between three options, which is the correct one to do, and it's generally pretty intuitive. Once you've played a couple solo games, you'll have that pretty well, I think. Um, it's a simple solo game, a simple bot to use, and it plays pretty quick, which I like. It's not any slower than an opponent, but it's a little bit faster, I think. Yeah, I like this. I like the solo game, and I like the multiplayer game.
Hmm. I think the solo mode makes a very fun version of the game. I think it's very enjoyable to play with it and see how it is things go. I think that the solo mode very much moves towards having larger areas, larger fields, larger groups than happen regularly in multiplayer, even playing multiplayer two player. But that's just anecdotal. I don't know if it's true for everyone, but it's at least true for when I'm playing versus the mole versus when I'm playing against family.
Yeah, I've only played 2 times solo and 2 times two player because I only just got this game last week. Julius said last week, "Hey, let's talk about power plants." I said, "I think." I think I've seen this at my game store in the clearance section,
And I said, you should get it.
and sure enough, it was there. And I had enough credit, so I picked it up, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Yes, so I only had this weekend to play it basically. I wish I had more time with it at this point, but that's all right.
Well,
I have the game now.
we'll cover it at the back to the table in a year.
Yeah, I like it. That's a good plan. Anything else about this game, Julius? I need to go back and reread the rules. I think that's the main thing we got out of it.
That's what we learned. Is I'm glad we had this discussion for you, Albert.
Oh, I did want to mention one thing. It does remind me of a couple games, just to give you a sense of it. I think one of them is Carcassonne. You're laying tiles every turn, and trying to figure out the best placement for each tile. It's really it's a tile laying game, is what this is at heart, with area control in it. The second thing it reminds me of a lot is Small World, in the way when
Ooh.
you're playing the your turn, it's different in how the powers are and who has the powers and all that, but you're trying to figure out where to place your piece based on the powers that are unique to each person or each action, each round. Um, I think it has a pretty similar feel. Definitely a different game, but a similar type of how different the powers can be, for example, and how much change it could be in a game based on what you're playing with.
Hmm. That's very interesting.
I wish that had solo. I don't think it does. Not
I'm not
official.
sure. But yeah, I think that's spot on for it. And I think I would only repeat the same thing I've said throughout is that I very much enjoy the game. I think it's great. I just think that this does not feel family level to me unless you're playing the family level of the game. But the amount of thinkiness that goes into the different plants and where they all go and the fact that they all do two things um, just to me brings the weight up higher than I would have expected for other games from kids table board games and makes it more enjoyable to me. I think that this was a very good, very powerful game.
Thank you for the recommendation, Julius. That was one to grow on.
Well, I'm glad I planted some good seeds for you to look into things.
You did. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night. Thanks for listening. We love feedback, so we love hearing from you. You can reach me at julius@oneplayerpodcast.com or JLBird on BGG, and Albert can be reached at albert@oneplayerpodcast.com or Fractalune on BGG. Our website is oneplayerpodcast.com with the number 1, and we're also on Twitter at oneplayerpodcast. The intro music is copyright Angus, can be found at jamendo.com. The transition music is copyright by Dan Elduce Pancaldi, whose page is at donpancaldi.com. The One Player Podcast is protected under a Creative Commons share-alike license. Thanks for listening.